And welcome to Flexible Games, where we are jumping into another segment of tutorials for mod creation and programming for Vintage Story. This is more of an advanced look at GUI creation and GUI, when I say GUI, GUI, graphical user interface, for those unfamiliar. Basically, it's one of the hardest parts of Vintage Story modding. If you have to do a GUI, it is not a fun situation. It's not as intuitive as most people want it to be. And so the last 2 weeks has was just basically me brute forcing my way in and learning as much as I can about how this works, and spending the time to learn it so I can pass that knowledge on in small bite-sized chunks, so you can pick one or more of these videos to watch. But it's going to be probably, I'm going to guess, a 3 or 4 episode run in this Vintage Story, vintage engineering modding sort of playlist. So each individual video will tackle a single topic, and then we will get to other things basically as we get deeper and deeper into the tutorial. So we are going to try to I'm going to show you how I came up with all of the ways that I get this GUI here, right? So this here, let's zoom in. This GUI here, very, very simple at first glance. Very simple. However, there's some custom stuff going on here. This text is custom, right? This text updates as the machine runs. It has the machine temperature. It has the amount of seconds that the fuel that you put in it. It's empty right now because it's actually burning the fuel I put in it. The number of seconds that are left in the burning process. The power is current power of the max power. And then this progress bar, this was the coup de grace right here. This was a fun time putting this together. So we are going to start at the beginning. If you want a custom drawn thing, meaning something that updates in the background, if you have a block or a machine or something going on in the background and you want the GUI to have something rendering with updates while it's running, right? That is a custom draw. It is an event-based system. Anytime the dialogue is redrawn, anytime that happens, anytime the client is updated with server information, it will redraw that and call the draw function. So you can update elements. And so this is essentially a custom control, right, inside. And if you program it right and you do it right, you can then apply that to as many GUIs as you want, right? It's similar to how Windows has when you go to Windows and you create a Windows app, there are buttons and list views and drop downs and all of these standard controls, right? There is a ton of code that goes on behind those buttons and features that you don't have to worry about because you're just using it, right? So there's a way to do custom controls if you really wanted to dive down and have a really super complex mod. And because Vintage Engineering is not going to be a standard mod, it's going to be a pretty involved mod. I'm going to attempt to have custom controls that I can just drop into a GUI and just be like, this is it. This is the GUI that I'm making, and just have it work. Not easy to do, but it's one of the tests. So the first step, if you want any sort of custom control, any sort of thing, you need it to be a vector file. First of all, you need an SVG, which stands for Scaled Vector Graphics. An SVG file does not matter the size of the image, right? An SVG image you can have very tiny, similar to like the icons on the mini map. for Vintage Story. The really tiny icons. Those are all SVG files, or they're vector graphics, and so they're tiny, they're good, and you can blow them up really big. They don't get all pixelated. They stay crisp and sharp because they're not based on pixels. They're based on mathematical formulas to draw them. So the first thing when I went into this is I wanted a very simple, basically outline of my battery charge indicator. And you can have whatever designs that you want, depending on how complex. I did not want complex. So I did a very, very simple one here. Let's open Photoshop. Here is the file that I started with. Here's the file. You can see there's a black background, and we've got pips here at the 50%, 25%, and 75% mark, right? I wanted this to be really simple, and so it's exactly 100 tall, which is easy. Then you put 75, 25, and 50 pips, and you don't have to do any math. It's just pretty easy after that. It's a 2 pixel thick line, and so once you have the PNG, right? Once you save this out with whatever, you can use GIMP, you can use whatever you want, right? Save this out as a PNG file because it's really, really simple, and it's really, really small. And then you want to go to, where is it? File Converter. It's freeconvert.com. Super, super simple. And let's pull up, first of all, some of the intermediate files. So here is the vProgress PNG when I saved it out, right? Because it has transparency, this back here isn't drawn anything. That's why a PNG is always important, because the only image data is the black line. That's the only image data in here. That's important. So what this does is we can say, we can just drag the progress here, okay, vProgress, and the output, again, this is important, the output you want as SVG. Now, depending on the complexity of the file, depending on the complexity of your file, this could be, more or less accurate or kind of messed up. So once you hit convert, right, then it saves out an SVG. And here is the SVG. Now, an SVG is not a normal image. So when I double click on it, it kind of requires like a browser or a really specific type of program to load it in. But there is the SVG right there, right? And I can scale this up to 500%, and it does not get distorted because it is a vector file. So one application that you can use to sort of verify and clean up your SVG, let's close this. One file you can use is called Inkscape, and this is the free program that the developers actually recommend let's just drag and drop it in there, because why not? It's going to ask me like, hey, how big do you want to make this, right? Because it's an SVG. I don't know. Okay, there we go. So as you can see, this thing is, you can scale this thing up and make it like however you want, right? It's a vector file, so you can make it super thin or whatever. But that it basically, when you load it in, it will show you whether or not it's distorted in any way. Close without saving. I can probably open with Inkscape here, and I just opened the file directly, and it's the right size. So the way that this program works with its surface, I don't really like very much. But you can see this little border that's right here, barely seeable. That's basically the page, the size that it's looking at. The sizes are arbitrary. So what you want to make sure is everything in here is good. Everything is good. Once you have that, you are well on your way to getting the custom control in the game. This step here is all you need to do to get the SVG to load in the game with custom calls. So if you look at the source code for, I believe, my building gadget mod has a bunch of custom icons for all the tool modes, right? Well, that mod, the SVG files are loaded directly into the game as icons for all the building tool modes. But you have to be careful because when you load them in like that, you lose any and all color data. So right now, as far as I'm aware, there's no way, if you have a bunch of different colors in your SVG, when you load them into the game, they all get washed out, which is why the SVGs, if you look at the SVGs in the building gadget icons, they have colors in them. You know, there's red, there's green, there's blue. All of those colors disappear when they're loaded into the UI for building tool mode. So this step is all you need to do once you have a clean SVG, and of course icons. If you want to add more icons, they're all sized the same. Width and height are basically standard over all of that. So something like 48 by 48, or whatever you want to do there, just look at the base game examples, and that should give you an idea. Now remember, an SVG isn't typed to a size. So having a standard size that you edit all of these things in, like right now, there's really no telling how big this is, even though we do have coordinates down here. I could blow this up to be enormous, and the scales would all be the same, right? So as far as that goes, look at some of my building gadget icons, or if you want, look at the base game icons that are used, and those can get loaded right in to the game. But from here, there's another step that we need to do before we can use it in a GUI. Okay, there's another step, and that step is way more complex, and we're going to need to tackle that in a new video. Remember, I want to keep these videos short. You can jump in. So this is the way to get SVG files basically ready for the game. Create them in an image editor, convert them, on a file, in that file convert, which is the easiest way that I've seen, and then load them into something like Inkscape and just clean them up a little bit. You can directly create them in Inkscape. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. But I just found Inkscape, the way that it draws, to be a lot less intuitive, because I've been using Photoshop for 30 years. So I'm very comfortable with all of the editing stuff that's inside Photoshop, not at all comfortable with anything inside Inkscape. So if Inkscape is your jam, then you can create them directly inside here. But for those who are more traditional image editors in GIMP or Photoshop, even Paint, if you really wanted to do something crazy, save them out as PNG, convert them. I mean, you might be able to get away with saving them as a GIF. JPEG would probably be really messy because of how anti-aliasing works and how artifacts might draw stuff bizarrely. So I would really recommend doing very simple PNG files. Very simple. So yeah, next video, we're going to talk about how to take this SVG file and get it into actual code that we can then use in the GUI process. All right. So that's going to be next time. So thank you all for watching. Please hit that like button if these are if these are helping you in any way. Comment down below if you have something to add or something to ask. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.